Oh, yeah. Okay. I know it's fantastic. I know you're visiting with friends, people you haven't seen for a while. Sorry, I get to entertain you while you eat. And I don't know if that's going to aid in your digestion or make your digestion even worse, but we're going to run with it. We've got a great presentation, I think, on supervision and ethical dilemmas. So if you didn't think about ethics this morning when you woke up, we're going to give you a little bit of that today. By way of introduction, and I got to thank Mel and Marissa for being willing to help. I owe Dr. Tansey a favor, give or take, and he had a request, kind of a last minute request to fill in for some folks that couldn't make it. And I was happy to say yes. And I said, can I bring some doc students? I think they might want to present with me. And it's one thing for me to do something last minute. I recognize it's totally different to impose on them and give them some deadlines with short turnaround times and practice time. And so I appreciate them being willing to help. And they'll introduce themselves a little more specifically with their respective parts in terms of where they're from and their background. I happen to be a rehab counselor educator at Utah State University in the rehabilitation counseling program there. We have a master's in rehabilitation counseling and a doctoral specialization in counselor ed and supervision under the disability disciplines umbrella. I got my master's at Utah State and my doctorate at Michigan State. So that's why I've got my Aggie and my Spartan on here. And I'll let them introduce them a little bit more. But for today, and I apologize for this slide, I didn't realize I had the cues on it. So we're clicking through some buttons really fast here, and then we'll back it up. But we're going to talk about clinical supervision and gatekeeping and the ethical dilemmas that can come with it. There's some inherent ethical considerations, dilemmas potentially that can evolve into violations. We want to talk about those. We've got some questions. We'd love to hear from you. We're hoping to hear from the audience as well. But we'll talk about that. So we first want to briefly define clinical supervision and gatekeeping. Melanie will focus on clinical supervision. Marissa will focus on gatekeeping, defining it, what they are, and then some potential ethical considerations that go with those. Then I'll talk about gatekeeping role as it relates to accreditation for those of you that are educators in the room, and then also agency expectations for those of you that are coming from an agency. There's applications to both sides of this. We'll talk about some realities of gatekeeping and what that might mean or what that might look like for you in your respective practice setting, whether that's school in an academic setting or again, agency, private practice. And we'll talk a little bit about assessments and the process that go with it, with a couple case studies at the end, depending on time, kind of maybe pick your brain and see what you're thinking. So with that, we'll jump into defining clinical supervision with Melanie Poe.
Okay. Afternoon, everybody. My name is Melanie Poe, and I am almost a second-year doc student at the Utah State University, and Dr. Trent Landon is my advisor. I'm in the College of Disability Disciplines with a specialization of rehabilitation counseling and supervision. My life changed when I actually decided to go into rehabilitation counseling, and I didn't anticipate that happening. I hail from the legal field, and that was not my happy place. I thought I had actually chosen very unwisely for a while there and got into child advocacy, and I did love that. So I did find a parallel happy place for myself with working with transitional youth and vocational rehab. And again, they're like, well, do you want to work with the kids? I'm like, why wouldn't I want to work with the kids? These are amazing. And then meeting the parents and being part of the IEPs. But my background is undergrad, Western Washington University, Human Services, got my master's degree in rehabilitation counseling at Western Washington University, and now I'm at Utah State University. I do hold a limited bar license in family law in Washington State. I have that just to do uncontested things and write up minor guardianships. I do have a passion. Something that's near and dear to my heart is it's not necessarily mom and dad that can take care of kiddos, but maybe auntie or sister, even older sibling. So that's really important work for me. So I want to stay licensed, being able to help that, but only in the state of Washington, unfortunately, right now. I do live in Logan, Utah, which I have to say I love. So if anybody wants to take the trip, please do. I'll meet you personally and give you a tour. Um, so for today, we're going to go over clinical supervision and gatekeeping, like was discussed. And we're currently doing uh, I would say it's a mixed method study, but in retention in the world of rehabilitation counseling. And naturally, in the flow of conversation of that study, we talk a lot about why people stay. And it's amazing how much it has to do with supervision, how people are supervised, and the valuative experience that a rehabilitation counselor can have, and what's a reason why they stay, because they do feel valued and invested upon. Okay, I'm trying to use the green arrow like I was told. Here we go. So we're going to define supervision, and I don't like to read from slides. You can certainly do that. But if you have any questions, please stop me. I also want you to enjoy your lunch, but I'm always here, and I hope very approachable if you want me to expand on anything. Supervision, why is it important? We're going to discuss that. What is the purpose? Me being Generation X, I think we've all, anybody that's in that boat as well, we've seen supervision definitely change over the years, over the decades. And it was just shared in the last presentation that I was in, that a lot of the actual research on supervision started to evolve in the last 20 years. What does it take to be a good supervisor? I'm sure I could pass the mic in this room right this moment and everyone would have an idea of what it takes to be a good supervisor. Does it take having a bad supervisor to recognize a good supervisor? Sometimes. So defining supervision is an intervention provided by a more senior member, and not necessarily chronologically for the earth. I talked to someone today that their supervisor is much younger than them, and yeah, that can be the case, or by a profession to a more junior colleague or colleagues who's typically, but not always, are members of the same profession. This relationship is evaluative and hierarchical. It extends over time, and it has the simultaneous purposes of enhancing the professional functioning of the more junior person. There's monitoring that happens, and they also serve as a gatekeeper. And this is also, being from legal field, it just seemed like you were always guarding your bar license. There was ethics at all times. People were excited to make an ethical complaint, and you always had to have ethics beat into your mind and your awareness and in your daily work, always erring on the side of being ethical. So we'll definitely be talking about those canons. Defining supervision is an intervention in its own right, the use of which requires the trained supervisor to have specified knowledge and skills in multiple domains, including but not limited to education, consultation, and counseling. But with that, we just talked about having skills, there's the level of competence. So I wonder, if a show of hands, who in this room has someone that's supervising them that has an accreditation, that they have to have accreditation that they have to keep up? I don't know if anyone is in the field. Yes, okay. And is that like a CRC, or is that a state held certification that they have to be able to supervise you? So yeah, so sometimes depending on statutory laws or essentially guidelines by the organization, your supervisor is likely going to have some sort of licensure, but then also be able to uphold that. What comes to mind when you hear the word intervention? Interventions are used to address areas of deficiency and have an expectation of changing behavior. Well, I don't know how wonderfully warm that sounds, but deficiencies, when you're coming aboard being supervised, you don't want to feel that you're deficient, but a good supervisor is going to show you by example, make space for you, and make sure that you have the training that you need, the skills that you need to succeed. And those that want to supervise are also going to realize, I don't know how many people have gone on a job interview and you've kind of seen the climate in the office and thought, I want to work here. Or perhaps you're like, no one looks happy. Everyone looks tired. Everyone looks kind of like they need maybe a week vacation, and I'm good. Supervision is a developmental and supportive relationship that requires the supervisor working in various capacities. And so that's one thing. When you are a supervisor, sometimes you can connect the dots backward or reverse engineer your idea of supervision. You realize that not only is the supervisor supervising, they probably have a caseload, but they're also having to discipline and keep up with the paperwork and kind of be the cog in the wheel that keeps your office going. Right here, we're going to be going over minimal acceptable standards. The supervisor has the proper credentials, like I discussed. Perhaps they're a CRC, hold, for example, in Utah, and an NMHCA, in Washington, LMHC. But they have the appropriate knowledge and skills. They obtain consent for supervision or use a supervision contract. They provide a minimum of 1 hour of face-to-face individual supervision per week, observes, reviews, or monitors supervisees, therapies, counseling sessions, or parts thereof, provides evaluative feedback to the supervisee that is fair, respectful, honest, ongoing, and formal, promotes and is invested in the supervisor's welfare, professional growth and development, is attentive to multicultural and diversity issues in supervision and in therapy counseling. And may I ask the room, even with just a nod or a double blink, do you ever get check-ins when you come in? Sometimes people want to check in. How's everyone doing? Let's go around and talk about how everyone's doing. Just a check-in, a thumbs up, thumbs down, maybe a picture, 6 different pictures of a cat and different cats' expressions. Pick which one you're feeling today so we can all do kind of a check-in perhaps. But also, what have you done this week for self-care? What's one thing? Name one thing. And then sometimes you realize you haven't done anything. You're like, okay, what's one thing? Okay, I took extra 5-minute shower. I don't know. But you start to actually like, okay, next week I'm going to come back and I'm going to say, I went and got a pedicure or something like that. But you're going to start thinking, I need to work in some self-care, and it will become a habit. But before going into this field, I didn't think about burnout or thinking about how I'm going to take care of myself to be the best professional I can be. Let's see. Maintain supervisee's confidentiality, of course, is aware, and that's felt. When you feel that, I feel like that's felt when I'm being protected confidentiality wise, and I have that confidentiality alliance with my supervisor. That's definitely a trusting rapport that's built. A supervisor that's minimally acceptable is also aware of and attentive to the power differential and boundaries between the supervisee and supervisor and its effects on the supervisory relationship. And that is a delicate balance. There's a power differential, but it's important also to know that your supervisor has a life and also have work-life balance and has a family and responsibilities and things that they care about outside of work. Let's see here. Benefits of supervision. Well, we all need it. We all need to be able to complete that. But if you are properly supervised, you are going to be able to have innate ability to make ethical decisions. It's going to promote your growth as a counselor and self-efficacy. It's going to enhance your processing skills, enhance the application of psychosocial interventions. It's going to improve your case conceptualization, which I have to say, a lot of reasons why counselors sometimes may leave the field after doing this appreciative survey we've been working on since August. I found that counselors come into the field of VR and they don't realize what it takes to manage the whole case. They want to be a counselor. They're passionate about the mission, but then they look at what it takes to start the case from intake all the way to an IPE and throughout and closure. And they're like, that's a lot of paperwork. That's a lot of time away from me being face to face with clients. But proper supervision is you're going to learn how to glean all that information and process and be able to do that with help and not feeling like you just don't know, because it's okay to not know. Improve case management and counseling skills, and it lowers work-related stress and increases job satisfaction. And I was talking to Dana from Montana. I don't know if she's in here, but oh, there she is. Hi, Dana. I was talking to her saying, you know, don't you feel like if your supervisor takes maybe some 4 hours flex time every Friday, that you can take 4 hours flex time? So if I see my supervisor creating work-life balance for themselves, I'm going to feel like, okay, they're actually emulating what they want us to do. And I feel a lot more comfortable to take care of myself and things outside of work that matter just as much. So I think that's my personal opinion and what I've seen and what I've heard from different counselors in the Mountain State and Pacific Northwest mountain regions. So some realities and assumptions. Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, this is my last. Some realities and assumptions. Training on supervision is often not provided at the graduate level. I don't know if anybody in this room would think this is true or would assume this. Bachelor's level, but at master's level and PhD, is training on supervision often not provided. Typically, within 5 years or less, graduates seeking those opportunities are providing supervision. It has been suggested that rehabilitation professionals adhere to the myth that a good counselor is automatically a good supervisor. And I heard my colleague, Marissa Hernandez, talk about just because you're an excellent counselor, just because you're an excellent lawyer, you're not going to run a wonderful law practice and know all the business in and outs. And just because you're a wonderful counselor doesn't mean essentially that you're going to be running that office like a tight ship. Maybe you have really good rapport with all of the counselors in the office and you don't want to be the bad guy. And the last reality and assumptions, some realities and assumptions, there also seems to be an assumption that clinical supervision is just a doctoral level activity, which I can definitely say that my supervisor and the one that did my clinical supervision, they felt so passionately about the mission, but also about the office and all the personalities and caring rehabilitation counselors that were in that office, that she thought, okay, I'm qualified. I love this office so much. Even though I don't want the extra responsibility, I'm going to step into that role. So I would assume that's an assumption, but it's also, I mean, yeah, I mean, a doctoral level, you're going to definitely be probably set up to do that type of thing. So I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Marissa Hernandez. Thank you for your attention. And again, I'll give you my email or be more than happy to chat with you after this.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marissa Hernandez. I am a second-year doctoral student at USU. And forgive me for being nervous. This is my first presentation, but we're going to be going over defining what gatekeeping is. So we wanted to leave you guys with some questions to ask yourself. What is gatekeeping? What do you think about when you hear the word gatekeeping? Can anyone shout anything out? I'm sorry.
Make sure you're.
Oh, okay. Anyone? Yes. Okay, ensuring someone is demonstrating something before you let them do something. Okay, that's fine. Does anyone else have anything? No. Okay. Well, I'm just gonna put it out there. When I think about gatekeeping, I don't know if you guys go on social media, but a lot of people, when they use the term gatekeeping, it's how to keep people out of something or keeping them from acquiring knowledge or acquiring how to go about with something. But that's not the case here. So here, competent gatekeeping includes, counselors seeking supervision, ongoing education or consultations. Counselors act as gatekeepers within the profession by evaluating and remedying trainees, colleagues who may require professional development on sensitivity, skills, or judgment required to populations ethically. Yeah, and effectively. So we want to ask ourselves, why is it important that we have gatekeeping within this field? What is the purpose of gatekeeping? And what does it take to be a good gatekeeper of the profession? There we go. So gatekeeping is the ethical responsibility of counselors, educators, and supervisors to monitor and evaluate an individual's knowledge, skills, and professional dispositions. We want to prevent those that are lacking in the professional competence from becoming counselors. And the main reason for this is to protect our clients, right? And our clients' well-being. So we're going to go over some of these are the code of ethics that align with gatekeeping and that support us being competent counselors and gatekeeping and making sure we're ensuring client welfare, we're evaluating students, limitations that students may have. And this can go into, let me put my slide here. Protecting client welfare, evaluating supervisees that are supervising students that are in master's level training programs, and then gatekeeping and remediation for supervisees. These are some more of the CRC code of ethics that align with this topic as well. We apologize for the small text, but it is a little bit more in depth. So in the institutions, these are the realities of gatekeeping. How should we be balancing student and supervisees' need for opportunities for development against the primary need to protect the public? There's two different ways that are pretty essential in on this topic, which is the formative assessment, which is ongoing evaluation and feedback that is a part of regular supervision session meant to build supervisee skills. And then there's summative assessments, the endpoint performance assessments, often key performance indicators in academic programs. We want to ensure that the measures that we are using to evaluate students in the training program are clear, that the students know what is being expected of them, and if you're working through a remediation plan, will the university support you or your decisions from the program to maybe expel or develop a plan for academic probation if it's being seen that a student is not developing those skills the way that they should be within the program? And then we have a little slide here on agency-related realities of gatekeeping. So how should we be balancing counselors' needs and opportunities for development against the primary need to protect the public? And this is kind of similar to the previous slide. I know Trent will touch on this a little bit more with you guys, but how might a work tenure or even a union membership impact this as opposed to an institution like a university? Okay.
I'll back up just a little bit, not because anything was out of order, but because I liked the question, or I liked how this was responded to. So I'm backing up a little bit here. Farther than I intended, at least to that initial question on gatekeeping. And you said, sorry, I don't know your name, but it was the idea of I'm going to allow somebody to try something before I actually put them into the real place where they're going to do it for real. And I think that was a great way to kind of describe it in the sense of counseling in and of itself is built off that master apprenticeship model. It goes all the way back to the guilds of the medieval times. And there's a certain level of proficiency that needs to be obtained before I'm going to say, okay, you got to go out and ply your trade, ply your craft with someone on the other end. And so I really like that. We get a chance to kind of play it out and test it. And that's where I think these slides really came in that Marissa was talking about. Wait, there's an ethical component here? Absolutely. In the sense of, I'm going to jump back to where we were now. We need to balance student needs in the academic setting. So this is very much an academic slide. Marissa pointed out just exactly how close these were to me after I built them. And I'm sure in my brain it was perfect at the time. And now I see how they're very duplicative. But this slide is very specific to academic settings. And the next slide very specific to agency settings. So we'll pull these apart just a little bit before we go on. In a school setting, I want that opportunity for the student to grow and to learn. They've got didactic training. They're getting all sorts of good instruction on counseling theories or history of rehabilitation and disability advocacy. But now they need to go out and practice in their practicum and internship. And we need to get them to a certain level of proficiency before we do that. And so what happens if I find or discover something that as a faculty, we decide is a deficiency? Do I put them on a remediation plan of some type? Do I try to intervene? Is this something that's simple? Is it something that's going to require a lot of intervention? And so maybe from a curriculum standpoint, a program of study standpoint, they're supposed to move on to practicum and internship, but we're not going to allow them to because they need more time to grow and develop in terms of gaining knowledge and skill. And then if I make those kinds of hard decisions, will the academic institution actually allow me to do that? Will they protect me in that sense? Sometimes they may or may not. Students going to appeal. It's going to go up the chain of command, and a dean or some other higher level school official is going to say, nope, got to let them go because they're worried about liability. That's kind of today's world. We worry about that a lot. And so, how are we providing formative assessments, those ongoing evaluations and ongoing feedback so that realistically there's no surprises to the individual? How are we assessing you? What is it that we're looking for? How do we want you to grow and develop as a counselor? So, in an academic setting, if you're not making those things clear to the student, you're setting yourself up for some potential dilemmas, I think, later on, because if the school can go through the process and then come to the realization or come to the at least the expectation or this kind of a finding that somehow, some way your assessment procedures are not clear, you're going to be in trouble and they're probably going to rule on the side of the student. And so whether that student then is ready to go on, they're going to be allowed to go on. And so then it leads to that idea of, well, what about client welfare at a very basic level? Summative assessments are just the idea of, okay, how are they doing in a class? It's the end of the semester. Did they get the right grade? A little bit easier to monitor at times. And so they can be really good. But as all of those things, again, just the idea of if we're supposed to be assessing, if we're supposed to be gatekeeping, we're supposed to be making sure that they've done good with this thing over here before they get to go out and play with this thing over there. Are they really getting the opportunity to get the feedback that's helping them grow and really apply their craft? And then the same thing applies in this one. This one's a little bit more specific now to the agency setting, very similar, at least in terms of the questions. But now how are we balancing the counselor need to grow and opportunities for develop against the need to protect the public? I know when I graduated with my master's degree and I started working in state VR, and I was able to do that for 7 years, I'm probably lucky I didn't mess up well, I probably did mess up a lot the first 1 or 2 years. And I know I was sitting and listening and trying to learn and grow from the supervisor I had. I also remember sitting there as he's onboarding me in my very first office and trying to be a good counselor after I graduated. But he was talking about all these acronyms and community-based work assessment and all these things I just hadn't quite learned about in my master's program. And I was nodding off and falling asleep because it was boring. I didn't know what he was talking about. And he finally stopped and he let me go back to work. But I shadowed and I watched a lot. And so that's what allowed me to grow and develop. And so the same kind of thing, though, and I think this is where in the work setting we could do a little bit better with formative and summative assessments. Formative assessments are those ongoing evaluations and feedback that's part of a regular supervision session meant to build supervisees' skills. So how often are you meeting with your supervisees in an agency setting? Well, that's where we said at the beginning, you should be doing it for at least an hour each week. And one of the things I hear most often from supervisors is, how am I going to find the time to do this? And that's a reality. So that's why we're trying to talk about these realities of it. It's something you're supposed to do. And more often than not, you might not have time to do it. But also at the same time, if you don't change the oil on your car, eventually your car's going to go to pot and it's going to wreck itself. So what am I investing my time in? Is this a little bit of preventative maintenance, or is it going to lead to a total catastrophe later on? And I hope that's not the case, and that's a little bit too much overblown reality, but a little bit of prevention can go a long way. And so how am I letting them know what I'm looking for in terms of assessment? The worst thing you can do, and this was a friend of mine, as a manager, as a supervisor in a state VR setting, he actually applied this really well. He didn't realize it at the time, but it actually worked in his favor. He had a counselor that was struggling and not learning how to do the job. And he was frustrated because he liked the person. They really wanted to do well. They were doing their best, trying their hardest, but they just couldn't get it. And it's unfortunate to say that way, but the field is not for everyone. And that's where the gatekeeping piece comes in. And so we happened to see each other at a training, and he's like, Trent, what do I do? I really need to fire this person, but I don't want to. I need to gatekeep. I said, well, have you had that conversation with her? Does she know? I mean, you're seeing some things, you're evaluating, and you're doing everything you're supposed to, and it's just not working. Have you given her opportunities for improvement? Have you helped her hone her craft? Have you helped her develop as a professional? And he had been, which was good because he was able to articulate, we've done this and we've done this. This is how often we meet. These are some of the ideas we've been trying to work on. And so for about a year, he'd just been doing this. And I said, well, it just sounds like it's time to have that difficult conversation with her. So he brought her in as part of a summative assessment. Hey, this is where we're at. And rather than saying, okay, you're fired, he just said, what do you think? And she said, well, I think it's time for me to look somewhere else. And she had come to the realization on her own. Now, I'm not saying it's always going to end up that nicely or that both sides are going to be able to part mutually and do so, really amicably. But if we've done it well, even if we have to make those hard decisions relative to gatekeeping, the processes and the procedures are going to be in place. And so evaluation should not be a one-time thing where I come in once a year and I had two supervisors that were kind of this way when I was working in state VR. What do you want to work on this year? And we would make a pretty good plan. And then I would see him a year later and neither one of us could remember what we talked about or what I was supposed to be improving upon. Then I had another one come in. Okay, what is it that you want to do? All right, here's the thoughts. And it's okay, this training is this month. We're going to send you to this one. This training, I don't know much about, or this idea, but let me see what I can find. And then a couple months later, as we're talking, he's like, I found something for you. We're going to send you to Portland. And it was on customized employment. It was a really great training. So for him, my development was an active process. To other supervisors, it was a very passive process. Again, what do I have time for? Well, if your time and your investment is, I had a supervisor tell me, I don't have a caseload anymore. He actually did. He had a few clients, more difficult clients, but for him, his caseload was those that he supervised. That's where I'm going to spend my time. And that's who I'm trying to grow and develop. And so when we consider gatekeeping and supervision, this relationship, it's very, very close. I'm trying to supervise so that I make sure that those that are playing as they've developed over here, they're now ready to play over there. Is the theme for the day. That probably should have been my main slide. Play over here so you can prepare over here so you can play over there. That's good. I love it. But we work through it. So even now, some of the realities that come into this, if I haven't done a good job of assessing and then actually documenting it, how might work tenure come into play? The longer they've been on their job, is it going to be even more difficult to get rid of them? Some states have the reality of working in union membership type situations. How is that going to come into play? If I really need to let someone go, is it going to be possible just based off some of the realities I'm dealing with? Those things. And so it's a difficult situation to be in at times. And this is where then we say, well, what are we trying to evaluate? How are we observing and assessing it? And what's the standard of comparison? Realistically, what is it that I want to know? How is it that I want them to improve, or how is it that they want to improve? What is it? I mean, that's a great question, a good starting point, because self-reflection should be a big piece of this. What is it that you want to improve upon? And then how can I make that happen? So if I, as a supervisor, am giving that opportunity to those that I supervise, it builds ownership into the process. It also encourages them to know that they can look for areas where they might be deficient and that that's okay. I don't expect my students to be perfect when they graduate. I try to tell them, hey, look, you need to start planning for a lifelong professional development plan. When you graduate and you've passed the CRC exam or some other national exam, it denotes a certain level of competency, but it's a minimal level of competency. In other words, you can enter the field. You've done enough over here so that you can now play over here. But that shouldn't be where we end. And I think if you go to a baseball game, I love sports. And if you go to a baseball game, especially a major league game, but any level, realistically, but this always surprises me at the major league level. If you go early, they're out there and they're hitting batting practice and they'll do it for hours. So the people at the top of their field doing something very basic to practice their craft. And the person that really I'm not a big basketball fan, but the person that really got me thinking about this was LeBron James. Now, if you're familiar with LeBron James, there's a big debate. Is Michael Jordan better? Is LeBron James better? And I think Michael Jordan's better. But LeBron James said, I practice my craft every day. And if supposedly, at least for a period of time, if not right now, the best basketball player in the world is dedicating time every day to honing his craft. What am I doing as a counselor? I shouldn't just be saying I graduated and that's it, I've arrived. That's just the beginning. That's the step off point. That's more or less our draft, I guess, if I'm using sports analogies. Now we get to go enter and actually become a professional in the profession that we've chosen. So how are we improving? And this is where gatekeeping and supervision really should be allowing us, or those that we supervise, to improve their craft. And I think it gives us purpose as supervisors. I also remember a really good VR counselor that I worked with in a very remote part of Idaho where there should have been no success whatsoever. Rationally, you're like, who would want to work there? And there's no infrastructure, there's no service. If you look at a map of Idaho, and it's a bad hand. Michigan has it so much better with just the glove thing, but Idaho is kind of long. And if you just stuck your hand right in the middle of where it kind of goes from the fat part at the bottom to the panhandle at the top, he was in the middle of the Sawtooth Mountains in a place called Salmon, Idaho. It's 3 hours from anything that you would then remotely consider to be urban. And it was just a long ways away, but he did a fantastic job. And so I had the opportunity just to go up and shadow him one time. And I asked him about gatekeeping. He said, well, my job isn't to keep people out. My job is to get people in. And so it was a different paradigm that he was working with. Now I get that that's clients and he's trying to get them in, as opposed to maybe students or professionals that we've got to decide, are they coming into this profession or are we keeping them out? But his mindset about it is what allowed him great success. And I think that parallels now to the supervisor and supervisee situation of our mindset is what sets up success. Are we trying to keep them out? Probably means we're very dictatorial and demanding. Are we trying to get them in? Probably means we're understanding and we're developmental in our model and developmental in our approach. If I become too much of one or the other, that could be problematic. I still need to, as the other friend, at some point, maybe make a hard decision and actually invite someone to test the validity of their CV or somewhere else in another setting. But it's kind of how it goes. Okay, so then it lends itself to the idea of asking questions like, how you progressed on your goals for the week? What client do you think will need more attention and what will be your approach? Culture related issues. Have you felt unsure about them in any sessions? How can I help? What is it that I can teach you? What is it that we can work on together? What are some self-care routines? I think this is very important, especially as we talk about turnover and those types of things, but what are they doing from a self-care standpoint? And how are you trying to maintain just emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual well-being? As we consider, do they want to stay? Because we know supervision's tied into that intent to stay or intent to leave aspect now. What are we doing to really help them stay? What am I doing as a supervisor to build a culture that they want to be where they're at? One of the best supervisors I had was in agency. I was still in a state agency, but as I got there as a brand new counselor, I was kind of noticing there was one counselor that had been there for 5 years, and she was the next newest counselor. I was brand new, and she was 5 years on the job. The next person was about 10 years on the job. And then after that, everybody was 15 or 20 years. They'd been there a long time. And I think most of us credited our supervisor. He helped us feel like family. He did a lot of things that maybe were not by the book. And, usually about a week out from your birthday, we'd get an email. Hey, I know it's your birthday next week. Why don't you just not come in? Don't tell anybody. And everybody knew because he did it to everybody. Don't tell anybody. Don't take the day off. You don't need to take work off from a formal standpoint. Just don't come in. Enjoy your birthday. Okay. Once a year. For those that might be joining, you're probably going to know what state I'm talking about, but every year, for whatever reason, he liked to come to where my office was in August because the state fair was there. And he liked to bet on the horse races that were there. And so our staff training was in our office and we set it up more like a party. And then everybody went to the state fair afterwards so he could bet on horse races. But it built connection and it built this togetherness that we knew we weren't alone. And so even though we might be geographically isolated because of the region we needed to cover, there was still connection. There was still a sense of family and a sense of belonging. And so then as he had opportunities to help us build our craft, he was also attending to these other areas, physical, mental, spiritual well-being, and making sure that was built into the job and not being overlooked as well. And then once he retired, And again, this is I recognize a case study of one, and not that long after, the whole dynamics, the whole demographics of that region changed. And so I think it really was him. So then it really is a matter of feedback. In the next few slides, we're going to talk about feedback. And then, like I said, we've got some case studies at the end that would love you to look at and give us a little bit of feedback on. So let's see what we can do. So how do you set the stage to provide feedback? And this is where you can respond, and we've got a microphone, or if they're online and they've got some questions, or you can shout it out and I'll respond. But how do you set the stage for feedback? Many of you are educators. Many of you come from the field. So it means probably if you're not right now, you either are or will be a supervisor at some point. How do you provide feedback? Any risk takers? Oh, sorry. Please. Oh, yeah. Okay, so setting the stage by sharing things I didn't know, making sure that I get the opportunity to realize I can make mistakes and it's safe. This is a place to learn and to grow. Okay? Start with something positive, that there's always room for improvement, that we expect improvement. I like that. Okay? Please. Oh, that you're not alone. Yeah, that can be, I mean, just think about that for a minute. If you felt, and sometimes it happens, or maybe it never happens to any of you, but it happens to me a lot. You feel like you're the only one in the room that's not meeting expectations. And I know I felt like that as a doc student. I know I felt like that as an early career professional. And I feel like that all the time now as a program chair. Like maybe I know there's other people that can do this better than me. So do I really belong here? But so I like that idea. You're not alone. Please, microphone in the back.
So I am a supervisor, so I will start from what you did very well. Then I will ask my staff, if you will do it again, what will you do differently? Then if we have another staff with their permission, we may do a triadic supervision. If so, if you are the case manager, what will you do differently? And what do you think he or she did very well?
That's fantastic. And I'm going to use a sports analogy again because I love sports. I already told you that. Football, I love football if you can't tell. But that idea of what is it that you think you can improve? And oh, shoot, names are eluding me now, but it was a friend of mine. And I'm going to look at Beth Bolin for a second. Jared Schultz would talk about the Oregon Ducks all the time. He used to be the coach of the Oregon Ducks when they were first starting to rise to prominence, early 2010, 2015, somewhere in there. And then he jumped to the NFL and he didn't have as much success. I can't remember his name. Anybody know? Who? Thank you. Chip Kelly. Perfect. Chip Kelly was considered to be kind of an innovator in football. Thank you. And he was really good. But one of the things that he apparently did, so if his quarterback made a mistake, fumbled the ball, threw an interception, as they came off the field, sometimes you see, especially the old coaches, the old coaching model was just to chew them out, tear into them. What were you thinking? And just essentially make the person feel bad. But I guess Chip Kelly's question was always, what did you see? And the idea was exactly what you're saying. If I can understand what it is that they're processing in the moment, I can correct it. But if I'm only berating them for a specific behavior, it's not going to improve anything. So what is it that you'd like to improve on? What is it that you're seeing? I can correct that. I can start to adjust with that. I can play with that conceptualization and improve it. But if I just tear into you, why are you thinking, why did you even do this? What were you thinking at the time? You know, those are very derogatory. And I don't think anyone comes out of that improving. And it's supposed to be an improvement plan at some point. Okay. So thank you, Chip Kelly. Love it. Thank you. All right. So sorry, go ahead, Mel. But do you have a microphone? I'll make sure to repeat it if you don't.
Dr. Landon, you teach us a lot about the servership type of leadership style. And so with that, and I know it was expressed in different ways, but having that humility that I learn from you guys, I learn from my team every day. And so I learn
what I like about my style and what I don't like about my style and what I like to do more of. So having that humility and that you're being of service to the counselors and the counselors are being of service to our clients and so on.
Oh, that's good. In fact, when you were talking about that idea of humility, I think I learned it at Michigan State a little bit. I hope I have a little bit of degree of humility, but I would have students ask me as I TA'd classes, they would ask me a question. And so I got to the point where I was confident enough to say, you know what, I don't know the answer, but I'll find out for you. And then I'd come back the next week so excited because I found the answer. And then I found out the students couldn't even remember they asked the question. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Come on. Anyway, so humility is important. And we're going to go through each of these really quickly because I do want to get to our case studies. But that idea of creating safety, it's been suggested that we consider the manner in which they provide feedback only about 30% of the time. That means, to me at least, we're shooting from the hip. And I know for myself, when I do that, and my wife would attest to this as well, that I say all the right things in all the wrong ways. And I usually get myself in trouble. And an example of this, and I think my 14-year-old son must have picked up on this because he did it. And this is the example we laugh at because he's like, I guess he's just a little me, but his older sister had got cut from the high school soccer team. Oh, sorry, another sports analogy. And she was sad. She was mad. All of her friends had made the team. And I can't believe I got cut. Her name's Reagan. And then 14-year-old Mason with his prepubescent voice that cracks, that's because you don't practice enough. And he's exactly right, but not in the moment. And that's how I usually, so do I consider the environment and how am I delivering it? Because who's around me? Where are we? Who might hear this? It can be sometimes reinforcing, and it might be the right situation, especially if I think safety is involved. It might just be something we need to jump right in with. But how can I set the environment so it becomes a learning and safe environment? And we've heard that from a lot of you, which I appreciate. If the person doesn't feel comfortable, they're probably not going to engage. You know, I think one of the things that made, at least, tell me what you think, but when you're in elementary school, maybe all the way through high school, the one place you didn't want to go was the principal's office because you felt like you were in trouble. And my dad loved it because it was his best friend's father. And so he would get in trouble on purpose so he could go down to the principal's office and sit and chill with his friend's dad for a half hour and then get sent back to class. He didn't mind going to the principal's office, but many of us did because it was punitive. We were in trouble. And if the only time your supervisees are coming to your office as a supervisor is when they're in trouble, man, now they've been conditioned, and I'm not a behaviorist. I believe in some things as far as behavior goes, but I'm not a behaviorist by any means. But if they've only been conditioned to come to your office when they've done something wrong, they're probably going to come in with a heightened sense of anxiety. So don't be mean-spirited. Is it personal or is it skill-based? Oftentimes, if you ask for permission first, this can help with the dialogue. Because even if they tell you no, can I give you some feedback? No. Well, that's a discussion in and of itself you need to have. And how is it that we can be reflective and improvement minded in what we're doing? So feedback and positivity, be positive, balance, give as much positive as you do negative. If you only focus on the negative, then what will the counselor become an expert in? Probably they're not doing well. And they might not focus on what they are doing well. And we're supposed to be strength-based as a profession. So bring it into our supervision. So look for both strengths and weaknesses. Don't hyper-focus on weakness, and be sure to follow up with suggestions for improvement or dialogue and brainstorm with them on terms of how that might happen. How can we improve? And use that in that Socratic questioning method of, what do you think? What would you like to improve upon? And get them to really think about it for themselves. Be specific, though. Specific and positive direction is often better received. And I heard this from my wife, who heard it from her LCSW friend, her high school friend. And she was talking about her approach to counseling. And she said, clarity is kindness. And I think there's some very subtle truth to that. So be specific, don't be vague. This is what we're looking at, and clarity is kindness. I think both to ourselves, because we've been clear, but to the person, because now they know exactly how they might be being evaluated. Today, I saw that you did blank skill very well, but I noticed you were struggling a bit with blank. Help me understand why you did that. Help me understand what you were thinking in the moment. None of that is now derogatory. It's very skill driven. And if I do that, I can focus on the skills. What were they seeing as opposed to their behavior, which may or may not have been the issue. And then immediacy. Sometimes immediacy can be the hardest. It's just not always possible. Life happens and we have to adjust. But as best you can, engage in feedback as soon as possible after the observed behavior. It's just a reality that our human brain has limited recall. So don't wait too long before you give some feedback. They might not remember it. Similar to my students that would ask a question and then I come back excited to tell them the answer, but they don't even remember the question. So don't wait too long. You might not remember the context, and context can be very specific and important. Be frequent, make it routine. If done well, it can become expected and not something to be dreaded. I knew that Bruce Christopherson was coming every Tuesday from 4 to 5, and I was expected to have at least 4 to 5 difficult cases that I had questions on the table so we could talk about them. Made me feel like I wasn't alone, that I had somebody that I could ask questions to. And the expectation was more or less, I don't expect you to know all the answers. We're going to talk about it and I'm going to help you improve, because I was brand new as a counselor and I really appreciated that. Be objective, be tough, but not mean. And there's this supervisory paradigm where supervisors that were friendly, flexible, supportive, open, positive, and warm had supervisees that were not as accurate in their self-evaluation. So not everything can be rainbows and butterflies. We still need to talk about areas for improvement. If we're too rosy, they might be missing out exactly on what it is and areas that they might need to improve. And the last thing, I say this to a lot of people, don't say it's okay. It's vague, and 2, it actually sounds like it's reinforcing. Oh, that's okay. No, it might not actually be okay that they were doing whatever that might have been. And so again, be very specific. And then consider too, what are the external factors that may be impacting my own homeostasis for a given day? How am I feeling on the inside? Did I step in a puddle and now I've got a wet shoe and a wet sock on the way in and I'm just kind of mad at the world? How is that going to influence any type of feedback I give? We need to be mindful of that. So again, just kind of as a reminder, factors that influence the effectiveness of feedback include timing, immediacy, delayed, frequency, more or less often, tone, is it positive, negative, is it balanced, environment, what's going on? Do I feel like I'm part of a family? Do I feel like we're all just disjointed parts and no one's really cohesed around some type of identity? The form, is it spoken? Is it verbal? Is it nonverbal? And then specificity. So more or less detailed, please be more specific than not. Clarity is kindness. And then gatekeeping and counseling, it is expected. So it can be done ethically and serves both the supervisee and the general public. And hopefully we kind of danced around those things enough today where you're like, okay, I see how this might apply, whether it's in the university setting or the agency setting that I'm in. And now there's a lot more to it as well. So we're always happy to provide additional, we can't just go into everything, but there's a couple resources I tried to put here for you. One is the clinical supervision, a handbook for counselors that was done. It's been redone. It's meant to be a very how-to supervision handbook, and it talks about formative assessment, a summative assessment. It talks about evaluation of myself as a supervisor, evaluation for supervisees, and it's a fantastic book. I think I use it in my doctoral class at Utah State. But if it was built with and written with the idea in mind of how can we make a very practitioner-oriented how-to type of a book. And so if you're looking for one, this might be one. And then also the special issue of Journal of Rehab Administration. There was, I think, 8 articles very specific to supervision and rehabilitation counseling. And I think these, I believe they're open access and you can get them. If not, I can get them to you as well. But I think those would be some really good resources. If you're just trying to say, how can I do this? And I want some resources to improve upon, might be some areas for you. So we might only get one case study, but I do want to look at one. And let's go to the one that Marissa helped me build. And we'll kind of play with this. It happens to be academic, but what I'm looking for now is just kind of tell me the red flags that you see as I read this. And so whether you from the audience or those at home, what are the red flags that you're seeing? So the context. It's a university offering a master's in rehabilitation counseling, and the students are required to complete a counseling skills lab course where they engage in mock counseling sessions with classmates. These sessions are recorded for feedback and are treated as confidential to simulate real-world scenarios and uphold professional ethical standards. The incident. During one of the practice sessions, a student named Alex recorded a peer's role play disclosure of their personal phone without permission to review later. However, instead of using the recording solely for study purposes, Alex shared a clip in a group chat with friends outside the counseling program, making a joke about the scenario. The recording included the peer's name and personal identifiers used in the mock session. How did we find out? Well, another student in the group chat reported the incident to faculty, and the department initiated an ethics review and found that what? What would come to mind? What are the red flags that you're seeing? Student broke confidentiality by sharing personal information. How do you remediate it then? How do you fix the problem? Tony, is that, I got an idea, kind of a roll of the fingers? So meet with the student directly. And if I can, I'll keep you on the spot for one more question. How would you approach it? I'm the student. What are you going to ask me? Oh, she's going to give you a microphone.
Yeah, so first I would meet with the student. Second, I would let them know that we know, because I think a lot of students don't recognize that faculty hear things, and I think that needs to be directly stated.
Okay.
I know that wasn't the response you wanted, but my students
good.
don't seem to realize that faculty are in the know about things. And then I think asking them about, their role in the situation, what role do they play in the situation? And I think that this is a time that you have to be more direct. This is a very serious situation, and this is not about what you're going to do better next time. I think you have to be more direct here.
Perfect. I love it. Clarity is kindness. And again, one of the dangers I think is, oh, it's okay. That somehow we could reinforce the student in the mindset, it's okay. I don't know that that's what we're trying to communicate, but we come in and we say, it's okay, we're going to figure this out. Might actually in some ways cut your own legs out from underneath you because of the severity of the situation. Okay. Any other thoughts? Please. Oh, we'll bring the microphone. It's coming. It's coming. She's running.
Thank you. I was sort of thinking like one way, as soon as this popped up, how would I approach this? And I think I might ask, rather than saying like, what the heck did you do that for? I think I might say, so tell me what's going on here. Tell me what happened. And perhaps like let the students go through and recognize the errors in their way themselves. I mean, I'm sure that they would hopefully recognize those errors, and perhaps almost like rather than me having to, hurt our relationship by saying things that might be, might make, where am I going with this? Rather than me saying things that might make them feel small or embarrassed, sort of let them do it themselves. Like walk through what they did and what they were thinking, and then perhaps walking through things together for how they might want to resolve the situation and do better moving forward. I feel like that could be useful because it doesn't hurt our relationship necessarily, but corrects.
Yeah, I like how you said forward thinking, because the reality is it's already happened. Microphone's coming.
This looks like a gatekeeping scenario versus you're nodding.
Goes either way, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it is. You're not ready to be here,
Potentially, yeah.
and it's my job to let you know, and you've learned something. Doesn't mean you can't try this again in the future, but this isn't the right time.
Or again, we at least need to know that you're going to be able to play well over here before I let you play over there. And something's got to happen first, because the reality is this is a pretty difficult situation. Okay. Last one, and then I'll read the last one so you can think about it, but we'll be done. Please.
So you're still asking what's to be done when you see this, right?
Yes.
So I think based on what has happened, it has to be addressed directly. You set up a meeting with the student and you tell them that this is what has come to my notice. And I wanted to know why did you behave in the way that you did? So you ask the person directly that this is what has come to my notice, and I wanted to check with you, what was your thought process and why did you engage in this specific activity? And did you realize the implications of what you're doing?
Yeah. No, it's great because it gets at section B1C of the CRC Code of Ethics, confidentiality, as well as B3A is confidentiality as well. And then section F8 is on student welfare and program integrity. So you got a couple different violations here. Now, the person may not be certified, so they may not be obligated to follow those, but as a program you are, and you can definitely gatekeep that, right? And then the last one, just to kind of give you a last one, think about this. Hopefully there's some red flags that stand out here. If there's not, it might be something to talk about. But you're a supervisor at a local state agency and supervise 10 counselors and their support staff. Your agency provides a combination of mental health and rehabilitation services in your agency. 6 of the counselors have 5 or more years of experience. And because of this, you spend most of your time working with the 4 new counselors. The incident. One of the seasoned counselors was talking with one of the new counselors at the water cooler about a client that has not been compliant and trying to give them advice on how to deal with difficult clients. This wasn't a consultation, but rather a vent session. The water cooler is located near the main client waiting area, and the discussion was rather emotional and loud, and multiple clients and support staff were able to hear the remarks. The client also happened to be in the waiting room as they had dropped in to follow up with their counselor on some assignments. The client would now like to meet with you as the supervisor instead. So again, discovery and investigation based on the information, your first 3 steps would be what? And that was kind of what we would talk about. So hopefully you saw some red flags and it was a nice slow softball pitch, our last sports analogy of the day down the middle. If you have questions, comments, ideas, suggestions, please feel free to reach out to any of us. Very happy. Thank you for being here, especially over your lunch period. And I know you had to eat while we were talking, so I appreciate that, but hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks.